you get too hung up on just doing it. I know I've mentioned in the past, you know, like, remember, we're not here to do things for our clients. We're not here to do to our clients. We're here to do with our clients. So that's why I thought I would just spend a wee minute or two just talking about that, just maybe to even remind myself what my role is within Trellis. We all, and that's you, me, everybody, we all have physical, sensorial, cognitive and emotional needs, regardless of our age and ability. And the diverse range of activities that are connected to gardening and the natural world go a long way to addressing these needs. Now, I am no scientist, and my old science teacher will endorse that 100%. But I see all of these inherent needs being realised as a chemistry in the garden. Wonderful things can and do happen when the necessary ingredients are put in place. Today, I'm going to be potting up some of these succulents, which I'm going to get to, I promise, in a minute. So potting up a few succulents, which on the surface sounds like something nice to do for half an hour or so. But if we delve deeper, we can see that there are many outcomes for clients that may be met by this activity, which include light exercise, fine motor skill activity, sensorial touch, social inclusion, creativity. I mean, we can get really creative. Where's my fancy little, basically a jar with ribbon round about it. So we've got our sensorial touch, social inclusion, creativity, accomplishment, and of course the enjoyment of working as part of a group, or even the converse, the opportunity to engage on a one-to-one basis, which in itself can lead to a wealth of more outcomes. But as we all know, planning is key. We all, as activity coordinators, you know, there's an awful lot of work goes in advance of actually doing the activity. And depending on your group, the activity might all be set up before you gather your group, a bit like me here today. I've got this all set out. You guys don't have to watch me or get involved in doing that part of it. But the setting up and the preparing the session might actually form an integral part of the entire session. And for some, that part of the activity might actually be more interesting and more fulfilling for them. So don't ever rule out, you know, fetching a bag of, a small bag of compost or filling up the water can is a menial task that they shouldn't be doing. Maybe that's the very task that they would enjoy. So whatever way you set and plan your session, as long as you're comfortable with your level of preparation, it means that when you actually do go into the session, you are in the moment and sharing the experience with your clients. You're doing with your client, you're not doing to the client. And you're not fretting about fetching the gravel. You're not having to take a phone call. You're in the moment. And crucially, whilst in that moment, whilst being absorbed, remember to observe those round about you. Even just a smile or someone, you know, voicing their thought, passing their comment on that ugly looking plant or that beautiful looking plant, their thoughts at whatever level that they're participating in is an important thing to be noting. And these are the notes that are worthy of you taking down and sharing with their family members, perhaps. So, enough chatting about what we are doing the whole time. Let's start talking about the succulents. Now, Jenny's PowerPoint was really interesting, and there was a couple of people I noticed asked for a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, which I'm sure we'll be able to share with you, and that might be a nice thing to share with your own group in advance of actually doing a demo like what I'm going to be doing with yourselves. It helps set the scene. So, succulents, what are they? As Jenny told us in her PowerPoint, they are plants with thickened, fleshy parts. Now, you can't really see this because I'm probably too far away. I can squash that, and it's a bit like squashing the fat part of your ear, where if you've got your ears pierced, where you've got your earrings hanging from. So that is full of water. These succulents hold water in their big fat fleshy leaves. Okay, probably the two most well-known ones are the cactus. Now, I'm not going to be potting up cactus today just because They are really, really prickly and they're wee pains in the neck, but you can use tongs. So cactus are really popular. And the other one that Jenny did make reference to, which I'm sure we're all aware of, is your aloe plant. And I've got a friend who's a nurse who keeps one on her windowsill in the kitchen. Succulents are found are in dry, arid places where the temperatures are very high during the day, where there's very little water, rainfall, and the soil conditions are pretty poor. And over the years, smaller succulents, and when I say smaller succulents, that's because some cactus, as Jenny showed the PowerPoint presentation, grow huge. They're massive. They're ginormous. The biggest I've ever seen was probably about, I don't know, about 15 foot tall, when I was lucky enough to visit a desert area. And I didn't actually believe they grew as big as that. I only ever saw the tumbleweed kind of cactus that you saw in cowboy and western films. So anyway, the smaller succulents that became really popular over the years as houseplants, due in part to their quirky appearance. I mean, like, what is not to like about that? There's nothing normal to my mind about that plant. So popular houseplants due to their quirky appearance and their fairly minimal care needs. There are hundreds to choose from. This is just a small selection here. And sadly, you can't get to view them. But perhaps you can see from the angle of the camera that there is a wealth of texture here. And this activity of even just talking about a small selection like this and handling them, passing them round about, would make a great sensorial experience. We've got the slightly jaggy Howorthia, it's called, which is commonly found in all the garden centres. So it's spiky. And then we've got this little plant, it's an aeonium. It's like a tiered tactile rosette, and it gives off little plumes of flowers in the late summertime. And then we've got this odd, weird, cartoon-eared shape plant. So this one, which I think is my favourite, it is a crassula, and I only know that because I had the label on it. But to me, this looks like something that should be in a scene with Ariel, Sebastian and Flounder the fish. So plenty to look at and plenty to handle. They don't really give off flowers. Many of us grow houseplants for their flowers. But on the whole, succulents like these are grown for their foliage and their quirky appearance. This is a kalanchoe, a very common houseplant. And I dare say somebody would have got one as a Christmas present. Now, this is one that I bought last summer, or actually it was September when I bought it. I remember buying it specifically, funnily enough. And this is thrived on neglect in my back door porch. I had a massive flowers at the end of September, beginning of October. They all started to die back. I cut them all off. I starved it of water. And then when the buds started to develop about 3 weeks ago, I started to water it again very sparingly. And you can see all these new buds, flower buds coming in. And this is going to give me another great show of flower in a couple of weeks' time. Now that plant's common name is Flaming Katie. It's one of the few succulent that flower all year round. The rest of these ones that we're looking at today, if they do flower, they tend to flower at the end of summertime, kind of like July, August time. Okay, so enough chat. Let's get talking about actually doing the demo. These are a whole load of planters that I have filled up with various wee succulents. This is, I can't even remember what was in this dish. Oh, noodles. I remember now. It was noodles that I got out the shop. No drainage holes in the bottom. Composting, and they don't need a deep layer depth of compost, because if you remember, they live in, naturally their habitat is in arid conditions, so the soil conditions are really, really poor, so we don't want to give them good compost. And this is a wee sort of like sedum. This is going to spread, and this rosette will spread out. So this is a bit of a landscape scene I was trying to create there. Guess what I got for my Christmas? And guess who ate them in a matter of days? And what I've done is I have potted up my Heroes chocolate empty tin with a couple of succulents there. This was a Christmas present I got given with some flowers in it, fresh flowers. The fresh flowers died very, very quickly, but I just potted up one of the succulents inside it. And I don't know where I'm going to sit it yet, but I'll find a wee home for it. So what I'm trying to say is you can basically put them inside anything. I made a gingerbread, and this is my empty tricot tin that I potted up, that really funny looking grass type thing. Another jar, a bit like the jar that Jenny showed us in the PowerPoint presentation. Lots of, you can see the gravel in here, putting in a lot of drainage, but I'll talk a bit more about the watering in a short while. Mason jars, all these things you can get in charity shops. So don't go out your way to buy expensive posh looking vases or anything like that. You don't need them. My next challenge is I'm going to be creative with an old pot that I don't use anymore. So I'll be creative with that as well. So lots of ways, lots of places we can pot these things up in. Jenny mentioned the terrariums earlier on as well, and a terrarium can be enclosed or not enclosed. And the reason for the terrariums was because in days gone by in the 18th century, early 19th century, you know, like our house conditions aren't what they are today. They were damp, they were full of smoke, not conditions that we could grow plants in. Whereas we now live in nice, clean houses, we've got central heating, so most plants don't need that enclosed, protective environment anymore. So what do we need? We need to have compost. And the compost that we're going to use is just a general purpose compost, just run of the mill out of the garden centre. We don't want expensive stuff with extra feeding or anything like that in it. So I'm just going to put in a dod. I hope everybody knows what a dod is. A dod is just a big dod, okay? And this is pea gravel, drainage grit, horticultural grit. It's all the kind of same stuff. So same again, the same size of dod. And if you can get it, this is perlite. Okay, it's actually dried volcanic rock, so it is. I'm just going to mix the same in again, a bit of a dod. Now you'll see the kind of, I'm going to use the word fumes, they're not fumes. This came off, and if you're working with people with respiratory conditions, do not let that go off next to them, or else they will choke and flutter, and that's not good for them. Do your mixing where they are not about. Okay, so I'm just going to mix this all up, and you can see that I've now got, or you can actually hear as well, it's quite gritty and lots of perlite through it, which is quite nice for the colour, adding a bit of white in there. And the amount of compost now is only a third. So that is good. Very little nutrients available to the plants. if we're too kind to them, if we give them too much nutrients, the plant won't thrive. They actually thrive in poor conditions. Okay, so that's us got our compost. I'm going to use, this is a jam jar, which I could decorate with Christmas just over, and Valentine's Day and Easter just coming around. Maybe you could buy some nice spring-like colours, or Valentine perhaps colours. Excuse me. Or those that did Jingle Bells with us will remember that we were sticking on little Christmassy stickers. We could get some bunny rabbits. I don't know if you can see them okay, but you get the idea. Yep. I'm not going to decorate them just now though. I'm just going to get on with doing my basically the basic potting up of the compost into the jar. Okay, this is the little plant that I'm actually going to use. I reckon that'll look quite sweet in there. I don't want it to be over potted. Over potted is when you've got far too much compost round about it. A, there's too much nutrients available, and B, the compost will hold on to far too much water. And the last thing we want for these plants is them sitting in damp conditions. Again, they will die if they're sitting in damp conditions. So we can use a spoon to fill our compost. You could use a little scooper, a beaker, but just be aware of your own client group, and if they see a beaker and a spoon for eating and drinking out of, you know not to use them. I'm just going to put a small layer in at the bottom. You can see that there's hardly anything in there. I'm just going to squeeze the bottom of the flower pot, and it comes out quite easily. Now this is bone dry. You can see how dry it is by me doing that to it. You don't water succulents in the winter time at all. You really ensure that they get a period of complete drought to mimic their natural environment. So this is bone dry, but don't worry about that. That's good. Now I'm just going to pop that in and sit it on that base. These plants are quite robust. Some plants, Jenny and I were speaking about this there, some plants just say, oh, please don't touch me, I'm too fragile. Whereas these actually say, come on, I can actually take a bit of a battering. So what I quite like about them is you can actually be relatively rough with them, if that's a good word for it. Don't worry about being too delicate handled with them. So perhaps this is a job for two people. Somebody could use their fingers to hold the leaves back, and the other could scoop compost around the side. And then I'm just going to take the handle of my spoon, and I'm just going to sort of like poke round the sides to get the compost to settle down. Yep. Now you possibly can't see the little plant is just sitting slightly proud of the new layer of compost that I've put in. I'll explain that in a wee minute why I've left it like that. Got a paintbrush here. Depending on the type of succulent you've actually planted up, sometimes you get the compost all stuck in between the tiers of branches of leaves, and it's a good idea just to get your paintbrush and quickly brush off any excess bits, because again we don't want them getting wet or damp, because the damp bits of compost attached to any leaves would rot the leaves. They really do like it dry. Okay, So I've now got my plant inside my compost. I have got some decorative stone here. I bought this out of the range. You get it in gold, red, green. If anybody's into their goldfish and aquariums, you can get loads of fancy coloured stones out of fish supply shops and places like that as well. Just give it a good wash before you put it in. That's a wee drop of red I've got left over. This is really nice. You can see that. That's what I've decorated some of my other ones with. Done. And of course, we can use moss as well to top dress the compost with. But I am going to use these white stones. Take a spoon. Same thing, I'm just going to pull back the bottom layer of leaves. And put the stones all the way around, having them go as close into the stem where it comes out, where it joins its roots basically, as much as possible. There we go. So we've got the compost, a layer of stones, and then as we look down, we can see the little plant. Now, the decorative stones enhance the appearance of the actual plant itself, but they also act as another drainage layer. It's a collar between their neck. The actual leaves of the plant and the root of the plant are separated by this layer of dry stone. Again, if the leaves get too damp for any length of time, they will start to rot and the whole plant will just rot and die off. So, where to put this little plant now that I've got it potted up? South window, south facing window, or an east-south facing window would be good. Most succulents would do well in that environment. You get types of succulents that are called chryssulas. They tend to do better in slightly shadier conditions, so you could look out for them in the garden centre. Do not water in the autumn, late autumn through to winter, but give them a drink once a week in the spring throughout summertime. Now, give them a drink once a week, give them a good drink and let the plant completely dry back out again and let it dry out. Now, you know when you water, you change the colour of the compost. Now, I'm going to water this one just for demonstration. I'm going to avoid pouring the water over the actual leaf of the plant. I'm going to aim for the side. And this is where these little bottle top waters come into their own, because the angle and the aiming is much more accurate. Now, don't know how good this is, but if you can see the water, the compost changes colour.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to fill that up like so. And I will not water this, well, because it's January, I'm not going to water this again until March probably, okay? But during the summertime, when I am watching it, I'm only going to water that when I see this kind of dark brown colour of compost has changed back to that sort of drier, paler brown colour of compost. When you get these succulents, you'll be able to feel that their leaves are full of water. The posh horticultural term for that is turgid. It means that they're firm to touch and you can feel the water in there. When they get to feel limp, that's a good sign that they need a good drink of water, and it will soak the water up. Store all the water in here, then it slowly drip feeds the water back down to its roots to redisperse that source of liquid. What else can I tell you? Oh yeah, repotting. eventually, like all small things, all babies grow. And this was one that I potted last. Actually, I didn't pot it, my niece potted it, Alison. So thank you, Alison, for sharing this with us. This was a jam jar that she put ribbons round about for decoration, and she potted up a little baby succulent in there, which then outgrew itself. And it grew up and it came out of here. So I am going to pot that into this jar later on. It's got more space for it to actually grow, but not so much compost that is going to be a problem for it. And the last thing I want to show you is, if I can find it, she says, hopefully. Yeah, this is a small aloe plant related to the aloe vera plant. And it's got a little baby starting to develop at the side here. Now, it's not ready to be detached from its mum yet, but I'm going to keep my eye on that. And when it's a little bit bigger, I'm actually going to separate it and I'll pot it into the same mix again, that perlite compost gravel mix. I'll pot it into another empty little pot like this, and I will grow it on to get another little baby to grow and pot myself. And I think that's about it. I'm sure I've forgotten 101 things I wanted to tell you, but maybe some of the questions will pull that out of me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joan. Have we got any questions there, Jane, at all?
We certainly do. Let me start at the top. So we were at, it was Jennifer asked, she's always wondering how long lasting the bottle gardens are before the plants get too big for the container, and are they slow growing?
Depending on what actual plant you put in, like everything, we all grow at different rates. I have planted up some of the shop bought sort of gift pack terrarium things that you get, and what I found is they always put in things that look good for the first 6 months, and then they all start to grow at different rates. And something grows really, really big and the others are still pathetic wee things. It's a bit trial and error is what I would say. But what you can do is if you plant something and it does take over too quickly, just remove it and pot it in its own container and replace it with something much more similar to what is staying at that kind of more compact, slower growing state.
Okay, and Margaret's asked, do any of them flower? And Jenny's actually come back and said maybe the Easter and the Christmas cacti are good examples of the flowering succulents. Are there any more, Joan?
Yeah, the wee jaggy cactus, they put on different, you tend to find that cactus give really bright colours like coral, orange, or kind of cerise pink. That's their kind of colour. I mean, I've seen a really nice white one, but they tend not to, they're not grown for the flowers. The flowers are very short-lived. If you tend to get a stem with one wee flower in the top of it, and it doesn't last terribly long. The flaming Katie that I showed you is probably the most popular flowering succulent that is available on the market because it flowers fairly profusely compared to all the other ones, which would definitely grow for their appearance, for their quirky leaf shape and almost prehistoric nature.
Well, did you put that in the dark to encourage the flower bud? The flaming Katie. Did you put the flaming Katie in the dark to encourage the flower buds?
No, I let it, once it finished flowering, I cut off all the flowering stems and I just actually kind of put it back to where it was, sitting on that was a south-facing window, and I kind of forgot to water it for a good few weeks. And then the poor wee thing started to put on new buds. I went, oh, good, must remember to give that a drink. So I've been giving it a drink of water every week since, and the buds have really grown and beefed up. And I'm going to get another good flowers.
And your treacle tin was admired by Sophie, by the way, Joan, as well. I thought that was lovely too. So could you tell the difference between perlite and, I don't know whether I'll pronounce this correctly, is it vermicelite?
Okay, perlite is white, and that's what I was using there, and that is basically volcanic. What's that stuff that comes out of volcanoes? I want to say
Lava.
There's another word for it. The lava, and then it turns into that. See when it turns into
molten something.
I'm not a geologist, so I don't know what I'm talking about. Basically, perlite is made from molten volcanic lava stuff, right? And it is very good for aeration. Okay, vermiculite does a similar job to perlite, only it's a kind of goldy kind of colour, and it is made from substances like clay that is really fired to a really, really high temperature, and it is broken down into tiny little fragments. And that is good for acting to an extent, aiding aeration and drainage within compost, but it's more often used for putting as a layer on top of seedlings when you've just sown them, and that helps keep, you know, a more level temperature within the compost, and also saves the compost from drying out quite so quickly. I don't know if that answers the question.
There was a question about the mix, Joan. So, and somebody answered saying it was a third compost, a third pea gravel, and a third perlite. They were all in Dodds, if I remember correctly. And do you buy your moss, Joan, or do you go and forage for it? Don't you really?
I've got plenty of moss growing naturally around about me, but you can buy it in the garden centres. They do. It's quite expensive because they've got to buy it from what's the word? People are licensed to go and collect moss in areas that are identified suitable to do it. So it is quite costly to buy it, but you only need a little. And the last time I bought a bag out of the garden centre, it lasted me for absolutely ages. But just a little point on the compost, you can actually buy bags of cactus compost out of the garden centres, which is a bit of a similar mix to what I was talking about there. But if you don't want to go and buy a bag, you know you can mix your own.
Okay. We have a comment from Anna, one of our avid viewers, and she says they look really attractive and they'll be excellent in their home because they can forget to water them for a while, which I think is quite a good thing sometimes. So I thought that was great money. And there's also a question, can succulents get sunstroke, and can succulents, are they good to grow in offices?
Can they get sunstroke? Well, probably yes. Well, actually, I don't know. I don't really know. Taking the medical term sunstroke, what I do know is they can die of no water. As much as we've said they can survive without water for long periods of time, you've got to remember in the natural environment in the desert. And now I had a friend who stayed in Arizona, and I remember her telling me this story. She lived there for about 3 years, and it didn't rain. It only rained about once a year, but when the rain came, she says the place was flooded, and they actually drove out into the desert to see the sort of, it was a scene from like some mad horror film, the amount of water that there was available. And these cactus quite literally sit, the water would flood the desert plain, and the cactus are sitting wet. But within a week or 10 days, that all completely drained away, and the cactus had soaked up all this water into its huge structure. And then it didn't rain for another 11 and a half months. So the plant knew how much water to soak up to live for the next 11 and a half months before it would get its next lot of water again. And if it didn't rain for 2 years, then, well, a few of them would fall foul of that deprivation of water, so we'll call that sunstroke. So it's watching how much, don't overwater them, but remember they can't go forever. during the autumn and winter time, I don't water mine, but that's probably out of neglect more than anything else. But now that I've been handling them this past week, I'm actually thinking some of them are actually, I've been doing mold squeezing of the leaves, and some of them are feeling a wee bit, what's the word, not turgid, the opposite of turgid, which I don't know the word for. And I'm thinking they could do with a drink of water, because I'm obviously not looking after them the same way as Mother Nature looks after the cactus in their natural environment.
Right. Stephen made a comment that last year in Poundland they had a really good range of gardening accessories such as toolkits and dibbers and a seed dial for only £1. So that might be worth checking out when life maybe goes back to normal after we've all been vaccinated. And also Anna again has asked, how do you know if compost is dry if the container is not see-through?
Okay. Get a pencil. It's a pen, but get a pencil and sort of dibble a wee hole down into the compost, stick your finger in it. If your finger comes out or your pinky, because your pinky will fit into a pencil hole, if your pinky comes out and there's next to no compost on it, and it's or anything comes out is bone dry, then it's bone dry. If it comes out and you've got bits of compost stuck to it, then that would indicate that the compost has got some moisture in it that's made it stick to your finger.
Okay. And Jennifer has asked, what about the bigger container you had, Joan? Would you add extra gravel layers so there are not too many nutrients?
Yeah, sorry, that the Heroes jar that I planted up, probably about half of that is gravel at the bottom, just plain gravel, no compost mix. And then my next layer up, the actual root ball of the wee succulent is sitting in the compost gravel perlite mixture.
Okay. And Lucy's asked, if they wanted to put a little pack together for each client to do this at home, do you have an estimated cost, Joan, for each pack?
Okay. We're lucky that we can buy some of our items from the flower market in Glasgow. So we can get the little plant for a bit cheaper than we can buying directly from the garden centre. The last time I was in Dobies, and that wasn't, gosh, it would be during the summertime, during one of the periods when you were actually allowed to go out and about a bit more. I always look at the price of them. And those little succulents were about £1.79 a spotted, round about there, for that size that I'm looking at. So you're talking about £1.80 a plant, I would say. But having said that, I was in Aldi's yesterday doing my food shopping, and they've got a selection of bits cactus, and I would possibly ask you to avoid cactus specifically at the moment until you've got used to handling the more softer succulents. Maybe aloe and the haworthia, they've got wee kind of jaggy bits on them, aren't quite so problematic. Cactus are a pain in the neck. I was working with mine, I've got the wee jaggy bits stick into your fingers. You've got to use little tweezers to handle them, so that's fine. The Aldi's cactus were quite big and chunky, and they were £2.49, and they were in lovely little containers that would definitely lend themselves to planting into a bigger arrangement. So shopping around is quite good. Or again, places like B&Q quite often stock them. And if you're a care home or a project, I would always go in and take some sort of form of ID with you and ask if they could do a bit of a good price for you. If you don't ask, you don't get.
No, that's true. Irene just said she was in Dobies in the summer and bought a tray of 6 for £9.99. So
okay.
So do they actually come with easy to read instructions, Joan, when you buy them from the garden centres?
They tend to come with generalised information along the lines of place in a sunny spot, water sparingly, which is fine, but what you're looking for is Sunny spot, yes. Bright spot, definitely. Water sparingly, I think, is misleading, because then everybody just goes every so often, just give like a couple of teaspoons, whereas you really want to give it a good soaking, let it soak all that water up over a period of time, let it dry out, be dry for a little while, then give it another soaking to mimic that deluge of water. Googling Gardener's World and Crocus, these are online websites. They have got good search engines that if you were to type in, like in the little search, but if you type in the name of the plant that you're looking for some information on, and the RHS, the Royal Horticultural Society, they've got good information on specific plants that could help you as well. Or even just Google the name of the plant into a search engine.
Okay. Grace has written, aloe vera can get too much sun. Mine don't like the sun in summer, too much sun in summer. So that was just a comment made about the sun and the sunstroke.
I think that probably comes out of born out of in their natural environment. They're outdoors and they're getting full sun outdoors all day. But where we keep them indoors in a sunny spot, and they're getting that intense heat through the glass, which is different to their natural environment. So yeah, that is a good point. Yeah.
Okay. And Margaret said she thinks succulents can purify the air in rooms. She'd read that somewhere. Do you know if that's true?
Lots of plants can aid the purification of air in rooms, and it's one of the main reasons that house plants are like we are encouraged to grow house plants. If succulents are any better than some of the other air purifying plants that are recommended, I'm not sure, but that would be interesting. I'm going to take a wee note about that. I'm going to read up on that. Thank you.
Another particular pest to watch out for that might target succulents, like mealybugs.
Is this outdoors that we're talking about?
I'm not sure. That was Claire that asked that question.
Bothered with anything indoors. Mealybugs, if you're bothered with soil compost infestations, I would take all the compost, I would unpot the plant that you just potted up and replace it with all new fresh compost. That's what I would do. Keep it in a well, like just raise it off the ground so that it's not sitting in dampish conditions where all these kind of wee bugs prefer to lurk about.
Okay, and we also have a fact sheet on indoor plants, so if anybody wants to look at that, they could go to our website and have a wee look as well. And there's also one on, is it perennium teak? So there's one there which can be downloaded as well. And Catherine said that IKEA often have a good selection at times, and local fairs, they're often very good value, but it may be worth asking on Facebook or something like that if somebody has some, if you want to buy some from somewhere local. So that's all the questions, Joan, today.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Pass back to Jenny.